Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. And today we're talking about improving the communication in your business. We're going to look at what the impacts are. In fact, let's have a look at that. So what are the impacts of communication in the business? I'm going to introduce you to DISC behavioral styles, which is an excellent way for you to understand how people communicate, why people communicate in a certain way, and to adjust your communication to that. And you can get free DISC assessments online. I'll point you in the direction of that as well. We also want to recognize character traits of each behavioral style. So how you can do that, identify your own behavioral style and the behavioral styles of others so that you can improve your communication, not just you, but for your team as well. And we're going to look at some specific areas in your business around leading your team, around converting sales for your business, and around customer service. So there's a lot to dive into there. We'll pick a small area for each of those. So you've got some specific strategies to work on or ways to work on to improve that in your business. So in the chat box, if you can just put in there what you want to get out of today's session, thinking about the better you have an idea of what you want to get out of a session like this, the more likely you are to get that. And if you're watching it on record, just jot on your notepad what ideally you'd like to get out of today's session on communication. How would you like to improve your business, your communication in leadership, sales, customer service, or in another way? And write that down and you'll have a better chance of achieving that. So before we get started, a little bit about me. I'm Nick Gray. I work with Action Coach. Action Coach is a global brand. I've been doing this for about 8 years for my business. Earlier on this year, I joined a firm in Essex, and there's 5 of us coaches. And effectively, Action Coach is the world's largest business coaching firm in Essex. We've got a great team working with business owners and building a community to help businesses to achieve their dreams. About a year ago, I moved to Spain and I work with my clients remotely. And one of my clients has actually moved to the south of France, and others are wanting to do similar things, or at least have a business where they've got better options. And so that's what our aim is as a firm, is to give our clients better options to improve themselves and their business. So whether you're watching this or on record, or you're watching it just now, at the end of this session, you're going to have some ideas about how to move forward. And if you're good with that working on your own, that's fine. If you'd like some help or you just want to chat about some of this stuff, then you just get in touch, message me in the chat box, or message me directly. Got my email address there, or our telephone number. So let's move on then. So about poor communication. And I think we understand, don't we, that if we want to have a successful business, then we've got to look after the people in our business. And that could be our team, that could be our customers, could be our suppliers, could be people who are attached to, shareholders or stakeholders in the business. So communication is how we get the most from those relationships, right? So what are the effects of poor communication? So here's some stats. 43% of the leaders claim it decreases productivity. 50% of workers think it increases their stress levels. Then what impact is that going to have on their performance? 42% of business leaders think that missed deadlines and extended timelines are the worst consequence of poor communication. And 34% of knowledge workers claim that it's decreased their job satisfaction. So you might say, so what? And it's good that you do say, so what? But what impacts the business on the business is decreased productivity, on stress level of the workers, on missed deadlines and timelines, on lack of job dissatisfaction, or lack of job satisfaction, if you like. How does that impact your business? Just stop, pause, and think for a moment. And And just think, well, how does that impact the business? Does it impact sales? Does it impact productivity? Does it impact the bottom line? I think when we dwell on it, we can say, yes, that is all four of those and more are impacting the bottom line. And what other challenges might they bring up? Poor communication. Well, here's some thoughts. In sales, what's the impact of missing sales opportunities? Reduce conversion rate, or not necessarily reduce conversion rate. You might be happy with your conversion rate. Could you improve it? Are you measuring your conversion rate? Do you know what it is? How could it improve? What is that conversion rate? And could we do better? Your conversion rate is what average is probably around 20 to 30% across all industries. Some are more, some are less. But let's say it is 30%. If you could increase that to 60%, then you're doubling your profits. How worried are you feeling? How stressed are you feeling as a leader or as a manager in your business through the potential conflicts or people not doing what they say they're going to do? And you haven't had a conversation, you're worried about doing that. How do I communicate that with them? How's that impacting you personally and then impacting the business? And then what about at the other end when customers are angry? And, you know, what stress does that put on you and your team because they're not happy, and potential damage to your brand or your what's the word I'm looking for? Potential damage to your brand or your reputation. And not to mention the actual conversation you've got to have with the customers. But the reality is when you've got an angry customer, that's good news. It's somebody telling you something that you otherwise didn't know. And that's an awesome opportunity, if done in the right way, to turn it around. Turn it around, and we're going to look at just how you can do that with customer complaints, just how you can lead and manage people better so there's less stress on you and improve those sales opportunities. So if there's anything else that you think that communication can improve, just put that in the chat box just now or make a note on your notes. We'll have a section for question and answers at the end. So what we need to understand here to avoid poor communication is to understand more about communication, about true communication. Have you ever had someone who just didn't understand what you were trying to say or didn't grasp what you were telling them? The true communication is understanding that if we're not getting the response we want, then we need to change how we're communicating. I like this picture. I mean, I'm guessing it was taken in the 60s or the 50s. A teacher's trying to communicate to his classroom of surfer type kids, and to get their interest, he's done something pretty extreme. Jumped up on the table like he's surfing a big wave and communicating to them in a way that they understand. And I think in our schools now, people are starting to understand the different ways that kids learn and communicate, whether they're visual, they're auditory, they listen, or they're kinesthetic, they like to do things or feel things. And that's important for people to learn those ways. So just again, it's in neuro-linguistic programming or NLP, you may or may not have heard of that before, but it's really the study of how the brain communicates. People communicate in different ways. So if you're not getting the response that you want, then you need to change the way that you communicate. And understanding a bit more about communication will help you to do that. So we're going to look at briefly the different ways we communicate now and what might they be. So when you're thinking about communication, some of the things that how do we communicate? Now, what we're saying is the first thing, words. So what percentage of the communication do you think is reliant on the words? So how we communicate, what percentage of that is reliant on the words that we say, the actual message that we're saying? Just have a think about that. Jot that down or jot it in the chat box. what percentage of how we communicate is just words? Well, it's a little as 7%. You could argue these figures, but there was a report some years ago that came out. In fact, I think that I want to say it's Kodak did this study, and it's 7%, only 7% of what we communicate is in the words alone. So when you're texting somebody, when you're emailing somebody, you can only communicate 7% of what it is you're trying to say. And let me just ask you a question with this. Have you ever had a situation where you've received a text message, you've received an email, or even you've got a text message or an email from somebody, or somebody else has got one from you, and it's been misunderstood? You've looked at it and you thought, well, what's the matter with them? Why are they being so moody? Or somebody else has got it and said the same thing to you. That's because you can't communicate the emotion, the feeling, the intention behind a message with words alone. We need also tonality and body language. You see me being animated, my tonality is going up and down, speed of my voice could slow and then speed up. So how much do you think is tonality? Tonality is 38% of how we communicate, leaving body language as being 55%. So think about that and how you communicate with your team. Are you communicating via email from your desk, or are you using text messages and WhatsApp to do that? You know, if you're primarily using WhatsApp and you're using texts, how could you improve that? Well, just by doing a voice message would improve it. Maybe a video call, maybe a two-way call could be done through a video conferencing. Best still is face-to-face. But we've got great tools now, as you can see with this presentation, on how we can communicate. We can communicate virtually with video conferencing. But we've got to think about all of these things so that we get the message across correctly. Well, some of you might be saying, well, what difference does that make? What, I don't care. I get my message across. If somebody's upset or feels like you're saying something that is upsetting them, if someone feels upset by your communication, is that a good thing or a bad thing? You might take the opinion that, well, it's their problem. But what impact is that having you on your team and their performance because of that? There's a great book called How Full Is Your Bucket? And there's a kid's version of it, and there's probably even a video that you can watch on YouTube. Really great book for you to look at, listen to, watch, to understand the impact of your communication on other people. And if it is a negative communication, how much that impacts not just them, but everybody else around them for the rest of the day and probably beyond as well. It's like a ripple effect. Great book for you to check out if you're unsure about that. For those who are sure about it, then why wouldn't we want to make sure our message is communicated in the best way? Now, when we're at school, we're taught something. We're taught something called the golden rule. Now, the golden rule is assuming that everybody wants to be treated the same. We're taught teach others or treat others as you'd want to be treated yourself. Now, that's a great way to start our life and be taught at school. But the next level is the platinum rule. And that's what I believe is essential for true communication. The platinum rule basically says that we should treat others the way they want to be treated, because not everybody's going to be wanting to be treated the way that I'm treated. And the same with you. And this is how the DISC behavioral model is based upon, because it's when you understand others and why they behave the way they do and how they like to be communicated with, you can communicate to them in that way. And that in itself just always improves communication. Now, DISC profiling. Again, like I said, I'm just using DISC because that's what we use. There are other profiling or tools, things like Myers-Briggs. But what we like about DISC is that it's something, because it's behavioral, you can recognize it in others. When it's personality, it's difficult to understand that and recognize that in others. That's why this is in our view, is a great tool. So there's a little bit about DISC. It was invented, well, there's a guy called William Moulton Marston who invented the lie detector, and that's what you can see here in the 20s. And then he invented DISC in 1928. I think the first assessment didn't come out till the 50s. But it was based on his understanding of what he'd learned through the lie detector. In fact, that lie detector came back later in his life as well. In the 40s, he was the one who invented Wonder Woman. And if you know anything about Wonder Woman, she has a lasso which she puts around people, and people have to tell the truth. So there's a connection there. So quite an interesting guy. Invented the lie detector, invented Wonder Woman, and he invented DISC. I'm not sure if he took it on to develop it further, but he was the one who came up with the initial invention of it. So what is DISC then? So it's a needs motivated and observable behavioral and emotions, and it's really about behaviors and how people behave. So it's a combination of nature, basically what we inherit, and nurture, what we learn through growing up. But what it's not is, it's not a measure of intelligence, skill, education, or experience, and it's not an indicator of values. So it's purely something. There's no right or wrong with DISC. There's no one style is better than another, although some styles may think that, and you'll understand that a bit more in a little while. But it's really just to understand why we behave like we do and why others do, and how to communicate them in that manner. So any questions on that, or jot down any notes that you've got from that, you can ask them at the end in the Q&A section. So let's look now at the 4 core styles of DISC. And when I first learned about the 4 core styles in DISC and had my first assessment probably about 8 or so years ago, I was really surprised and encouraged to understand that I'm not a lunatic the way that I think. There is a reason behind it. Before that, I think I thought that I was, I did these strange things. I thought in a strange way, which was just me. But then when you understand this and the 4 styles, you can understand a bit more about that you're not crazy. You're just like everybody else. So we're all a blend of these. Now, so we'll be a blend of, say, dominance and influence, or conscientious and steadiness. So nobody's one solely, but you'll hear me mention high D or high dominance or high I, high influence, because that just gives you the extreme in that example, okay? So let's start with dominance. Dominance is about problems and challenges and how they overcome those. Influencers, they're about people and contacts. They're very sociable animals. Steadiness is about pace and consistency. And conscientious is about procedures and constraints. What's that mean? Well, let me explain in a few more slides time. I'll give you some examples about how each of these show up. But think about it this way, that 2 of them, or half of them, are guarded. So they don't share all their feelings. So C's and D's don't share all of what they're feeling. Whereas S's and I's are very open. They'll wear their sleeve on their heart on their sleeve, and they'll tell you what they're thinking. D's and I's are very direct and to the point, whereas S's and C's are more indirect, if you like. And the same is true as D's and I's are outgoing, and C's and S's are much more introverted. And I'll give you a bit more of an example of these here. So this is an idea of D's as being a risk taker, very direct, forceful, self-reliant, decisive and competitive. Influencers, they're very sociable, friendly, optimistic. They're the type of people, influencers are the type of people you'll ask if it's okay to do something. They'll say yes. They'll say yes to everything and then come back to you a little while later and say, no, actually, I can't do that. S's are steady. That they're the sort of style that if you move something around on their desk, they'll lose their mind because they like things ever to stay the same. And then C's, they're very analytical, like a lot of detail. And we'll look at this in more specifics in a while about how you can use this in your leadership, in your sales, and in your customer service. So let's focus in then on D's. And what I want to do is use an analogy of, let's say that you had some people and the D's were just D, the I's were just I, the S's were just S, and the C's were just C. Although we don't find that in reality we're a blend. Let's go with that thought for the time being. And we'll think about how they react when they go swimming. So D's, for instance, how do D's go swimming? Jump straight in, you can see that there. So what do they do best? They take charge, they're competitive, they get things done. They're decisive risk takers, they're fearless, no obstacle is too big to overcome, and they want to get to the bottom line. So there's 17% of the population are D's, and they're very much the leaders, if you like. They're often leaders. So what's hard for them? Repetitive tasks, doing the same thing over and over. They soon get bored and they want something new. Being diplomatic, they sort of go straight to the point because they're task focused. And their rules and regulations, they're not great with as well. Opening up, they're not shy, but they're private in some manners. So that's D. So think, who do you know who might show some of those characteristics? Now, next, let's think about I's. I's, as I said, are very sociable. And what do they do best? Well, they inspire others to take action. They're very inspirational. They promote ideas and opportunities for people because they're very sociable animals. You can see there, if they went swimming, they'd want everybody to come along. They'd phone all their friends. They'd probably have meet them for a coffee to start with and go out for something to drink afterwards. They're very optimistic, intuitive, and creative. But what's hard for them is restrictions and routine, formal reports, keeping records, details. They easily get bored. Is this ringing the bell with anybody? As I'm talking through these, just make a note of anybody you think that is one of those styles. And redoing stuff more than once that's already been done is difficult for an I. Now, S's, they're very sociable too, and they'd like to come along to the party at the pool, but they want to be with all their friends, but they won't feel comfortable about ringing everybody. But they'll bring harmony to group situations. Had a client yesterday, we reviewed his team, and his office manager was an S, which is perfect for an office manager. They like to look after people. Build networks of friends to help do the work, and they're good at coordinating and cooperating with others. They're less good at competition, working in a dictatorial style, for somebody who's a bit draconian, and slow at making decisions. I've got here that they dislike change. Everybody likes change, but the S's don't like fast change. So C's, again, with the swimming analogy, they would go swimming, but they'd want to know everything there is about it. What's the potential risks? When are we going? What's the water temperature? How long are we going to be there? So what they do best, analysing and being organised, planning, and they like to have lots of detail. What's hard for them is working with unpredictable people like I's, or D's, because they're disorganized. Being outgoing, open, they're closed to personal matters. So, you might say, how are you? And they might say, yeah, I'm very well, how are you? But they might not divulge much about their personal lives. So there's the 4 styles. You can start to get an idea of why they are like they are, or why people are like they are, how they, what they do best and what's hard for them. And who do you know who fits into that style, fits into a C, I, S, or D? Make a note of, on your notepad, make a note of those styles and who you think falls under those categories in your business. So once we know that and we understand about ourselves and other people, we've then got to be adaptable, because behaving in a certain way won't be good for other people. We can get, if you're a high D and you say, well, it's tough, but just take it or leave it. Yeah, okay, but is that the best way to deal with your team? What's the potential impact of losing people and having to rehire? So we do need to be adaptable if we want to have successful communication. So it's all about, I lost my train of thought there, but adaptability, it's important to all successful relationships. So we've got to get to understand ourselves, understand others, for us to be able to adapt and understand the importance of adapting too. So let's pause for a moment then. I just want you to just look at your notes and think of what you've learned so far, what's been most important there. Make a note and hold fire for any questions. We'll come to those at the end. So let's get started. Let's think about DISC. How can we identify DISC? Now, this can be tricky, and I'm going to but once you get used to it, then you can start to recognize it more and more. So let's look at DISC and why, what to look out for. So D's and I's, they're more faster spoken. They speak very quickly and they get C's and S's are more slowly speaking. They'll consider. Now, the reason C's and S's are slower, well, S's don't want to upset anybody, and C's don't want to make a mistake. So that's why they speak slower generally. And a rule of thumb might be, if you can tap your finger in time with the words and the syllables that they are saying, they're probably a C or an S. If they're going too fast for you to tap your finger, then they're probably a D or an I. So at the same time, I's and S's are people-focused. D's and C's are task-focused. So what's this mean? So I's will, so if you go into an office and see somebody's desk or a new business, if they've got lots of pictures around everywhere of people and their loved ones, they're probably an I or an S. If they get straight to the point and they're just wanting to get on with things, they're probably a D or a C, because they're task-focused. And this will impact how they communicate. So how do you understand this when you meet somebody for the first time? Well, first indication is just by asking the question, how are you today? Listen for the pace. Are they slower or faster? If they're fast, they could be a D or an I if they're speaking quite fast. Listen for tonality, the intonation. Are they speaking quite high pitch and then quite deep? So if they've got tonality, they're rising and they're falling, or the tonality or the speed, then they could be an I. If it's just going monotone, they're speaking very fastly, then that could be a D, just trying to get his point across or her point across. C's and S's, they're going to be slower. S's will have more warmth in their voice. They probably care a little bit more, or appear to care. It doesn't mean that they do care more, excuse me. Whereas C's might be very monotone, like you'd imagine an accountant to be, just dealing with the facts. So there's some things there for you to consider. Faster, D's and I's, Tonality, probably an I. Slower, C's and S's. Monotone, probably a C. And I'm exaggerating. There's nuances in this as well. But think about what the content of their answer is as well. So when you're, maybe something else you could ask is, how's their business? How's their, how's their job? Or how are things? They start talking about people, then you're guessing that they're probably I or S's. If they're very much about the task that they're doing and getting on with things, then they're D and C. If they're not replying very much at all, then they might be guarded as well. So like a C. So how can we use this then in our business? We're going to look at leadership, sales, and customer service. So how can we use this to our benefit to improve communication and improve our leadership, improve our sales, improve our customer service? So we're going to, this is a wide area. So just on leadership, we could look at any number of different ways that we could improve. But let's look at motivation. Motivation. How do we motivate our team to want to do more? So we need to understand what motivates the different styles. First of all, as we've seen already, we can recognize what they are. And there's free online tests that you can do that they give you an idea of what people's styles are and a little bit of information. If you then want to get more information, I can give you access to a paid service, which gives you a lot more, probably about 40 pages of insight into the individuals. But start off with a free version, get all of your team, assessed and find out what their styles are. And then you can use these things that we're going to talk about just now with that. So D's, let's look at D first. So D, if you're motivating D's, lead with the big picture. Tell them what it's all about. Give them options. Clearly describe the probabilities of success and achieving the goals, and set boundaries. So let them take charge. So some simple things there to be thinking about when you're communicating with a D. Now, I's, on the other hand, I's are more sociable. And they're going to be inspired or motivated by different things. So give them special incentives that show them how they can look good in the eyes of others if they do this thing. Maybe short-term contests, because eyes have got a short attention span. So having something for 6 months won't keep an eye focused. So maybe something for this week or today will be something better for an eye. And reward them in front of others. Let them speak about their achievements. Jane, why don't you tell us about how you did that and to help the rest of the group? Eyes are going to love that. Let's go to C. C's first. So C's are going to be that they're very analytical. They like things done a certain way. So speak to their need for accuracy and logic. Approach clear, clean, and procedurally. Provide illustrations and documentation if you can. Avoid exaggerations and vagueness. So, for instance, I'm a high I. If I'm communicating with a C, if I'm just saying, oh, it could be massive, we could do this, we could do this, that's just going to alienate them. Whereas if I say, well, what we've done is we've got this plan here, and if we do this on this date, this on this date, this on this date, this is the evidence that shows that this is what we can expect. So nice and clear and structured to appeal to the C's need of factual information. S's, show them that their work benefits others. They like to be helping others, and how the outcome provides security for them, their family, their team, and connect to the greater good and strengthen their relationships with others. So that's about motivation. So who do you know in your team who's a D, an I, an S, or a C? And how could you use that to motivate them in your business? So that's leadership. Any questions, then make a note of those for the end. Leadership, with lots of other areas in leadership. I just wanted to pick one area, motivation, but we can think of lots of other ways. But actually, just on motivation, if you'd like to know how to work with those styles in different ways, then I've got a cheat sheet, if you like, for not just motivation, but lots of other areas, helping them make decisions, redirecting them if they've got things wrong, setting goals, these sort of things. So if you want that cheat sheet, then put in the comments below or message me that you'd like that to help you with the rest of your team just on leadership. Okay. So let's look at the second thing, sales then. How do we improve our sales conversions? Now, understanding people's disc and how you sell to them is really powerful with lots of aspects of sales. For instance, if you're an S who likes things always the same, and you're selling to a D who likes the newest, boldest, brightest thing, then you're probably not going to sell to them. So you've got to understand it for all aspects. But what I've done here is just looked at one aspect of sales, which is the sales funnel, if you like, or the sales pipeline, sales process. And that's how do we create a great first impression? Because everything else leads off from there. If you ruin the first impression, the trust won't be there, and there'll be something niggling away at them, and that could well impact the overall sale. So let's look at first impressions. So again, let's start off with Ds. So Ds want to know what the bottom line is. They want to know, how is it going to impact them? A formal, like business matter, get to the point. That's what they want. They want, you could almost find yourself talking the D out of the sale if you've got too much information. Be well organized, be conscious of time, and efficient and business-like. I's, on the other hand, they're going to want to chat. They're going to want to have a firm handshake, introduce yourself with confidence, and attentive listening. They're going to be saying a lot, speaking a lot, but try and focus them down on the actual issue. But as you're making a first impression, listen to them, and maybe even repeat back what you've heard them say to show that you really listen to them. Give them positive feedback, maybe a compliment, and make sure that if you're going to give them a compliment, make sure that it's not unfounded. It is a genuine compliment. Humorous, unusual stories will be helpful, and ask about them, their family, what's important to them. C's. So where do we go with C's then? So C's, again, we know now that C's are very formal. So, but just common courtesy and getting to the point. They're not going to want to spill out a lot of information about themselves. Speak slowly, calmly, and economic with words. Think with your head, not emotions. Maybe even provide an agenda beforehand. Let them know how the meeting's going to pan out. So what we're going to do tomorrow is we're going to do this, this, and this. I'll talk to you about this. Then I'll ask you to make a decision about this. How does that sound? So that's the C. And then on an S, again, business-like until they warm up to you. Give them a chance to warm up to you. Think stability, step by step. They're going to be unsure to start with, so listen patiently with them. Present in a non-threatening, pleasant, and friendly. Be friendly but professional. So that's first impressions for your sales. A lot deeper when we get into sales, because we can use DISC in a lot more different ways. And if you want that cheat sheet on the different areas of sales and improving your sales conversion, again, drop me a note, send me a message, put it in the chat box that you'd want that, and we'll get that sent to you. So the third and final one here is listening, and how we can use this to improve our customer service. So part of on customer service, we tend to think that a customer complaint is a bad thing. I personally think that we should be having more customer complaints. I'll ask a client, how many customer complaints are you getting? And they proudly say, oh, not many, everyone loves us. But not everybody does. If you're not getting customer complaints, then somebody's leaving you without telling you. And certainly in Britain, what we tend to do is we tend to keep it to ourselves and just not go back. So we want to know these customer complaints so we can change. But also when somebody actively does complain, they're complaining because they're disappointed. They actually want your product and service. They want to buy it, but they're disappointed. So they're being vocal about it. So this is great. We've got to be able to listen to them, understand why they behave, what they're upset about, and make them feel listened to. If you really made them feel listened to, and you can communicate back a solution that's in line with what they want, you can turn them from a complainer into a raving fan. I've seen that happen often because they're what's the word I'm looking for? They're ready to communicate. They're vocal and they'll say what they think. So if you get them on your side, then they'll start shouting about how wonderful you were sorting out their problem. So let's have a look at listening now. D's. So listen to what they want to accomplish, their motivation, what they'd like to change. Listen to their suggestions because they'll have an idea, oh, it should be done this way, it should be done this way. Make eye contact with them so they know they're listening to them, and don't interrupt them. That's a general rule, actually. The interrupting thing is let people get things out of their system, especially if they're being vocal or aggressive. Professor Stephen Peters, who wrote the Chimp Paradox, talks about that if somebody's angry, you let them vent off for 7 minutes, it's all gone then. The chimp part of the brain is dissipated and you're left with just the human part of the brain. So sometimes you might need to leave at 7 minutes. If you interrupt them after 4, you're going to have to leave it for another 7 minutes. So there is something around that. Don't interrupt. Eyes. So show you're interested in them. Let them talk. Maintain eye contact again and give them positive feedback and compliments. And match their energy and pace. If they're speaking like this with intonation and speaking fast, then you do the same. Do the same with anybody. With an S's or the C's. If they're speaking slow, listen. Because listen out for their thoroughness and correctness. Listen out for their concerns, their reasoning, and their suggestions, or for facts and data that's specific, things that are important to them. Listen out for those things, jot a note, and then repeat back to them, and use that in your solution as well. S's, be patient. Reassure them that you're there to help them. You're going to be there with them to get through this together. Be sensitive to their feelings, their emotion. Listen for what impacts them, their fears and their concern, and give them positive feedback and appreciation. So we've got there then leadership, sales, and customer service. Again, I've got a cheat sheet with customer service, with a lot of different ways to look out for different ways to communicate in different scenarios. If you want that, put it in the chat or send me a message and I'll get that, or my team will get that out to you. So, questions